serving us as we go as Americans individually and collectively. Two agencies took 20 years and couldn't come to a resolution. In fact, they almost came to a resolution, and then one government agency wanted $10 million more just to boot at the end. That is wrong. That is why people look at government, and they look at our government processes, and they say it doesn't work, because you can't get away with that in the business world. If it takes you 20 years, and I've been in the business world, pastor of church, been in the business world, if it takes you 20 years to negotiate a simple business proposition, you're going to be bankrupt before you can ever get there. That's why this matters. But also we have to look at a constitutionally limited government. And our founders envisioned a federal government that was strong enough to hold the states together, protect our nation, but limited in its authority and citizens' lives. But unfortunately, many in the current administration and the culture in Washington refuse to accept the limitations placed on them by the Constitution. And as Congress, we have to also take back our role. And when we take back our role, then we'll be able to, of oversight, and of control as the purse string, then we'll be able to do what we need to do. Limiting the power of federal bureaucrats and those who work to make de facto law, as my friend from Missouri talked about, through regulation is one of my highest priorities. In fact, when we looked at this, I started with Congressman Ted Yoho out of Florida. We started a freshman regulatory working group. I've introduced H.R. 1493, the Sunshine for Regulatory Decrees and Settlement Act, to sue and settle, which has been marked up recently in subcommittee, and hopefully will come to the subcommittee, full subcommittee, and to the floor of this House very soon, because I believe regulations are beginning of the end. And the increase in regulations, and I want to just show you here what I mean by this. The amount of red tape that continues to grow in this administration, and in all fairness, previous administrations, is way too much. When we start back at 2000 and we look at the increasing number of regulations, then we see what is happening. We went from, the 170 to 180 up to 250,000. And this is just in this time frame. Look at the last number, 5 to 6 years, how regulation has just expanded. We cannot continue this path. Why does this matter to you? Some of you are sitting here saying, oh, here's just another Republican. Here's just another Republican talking about, he just wants to make dirty water and dirty air and do all those things. And I've heard those arguments, but I'm frankly tired of those arguments. Because I live here too, and I want my children. Remember I said the 3 reasons I wanted to be here were Jordan, Copeland, and Cameron. I don't want my children and my grandchildren that I have not seen to have dirty water and dirty air and unsafe workplaces. But there is a limit to what government can do, and we have done a lot. So I want to say, this is why, and then you say, well, if that's just you talking about it, why does it matter to me? And I'm going to tell you why it matters. And it should matter to every tax-paying family in this country, every American. Everybody. I don't single out any groups. I take us all as a whole. We're Americans. And how do we know that this affects you? And look right here. What are regulations costing us? The average American family pays $14,678 in hidden annual regulatory taxes. $14,678. I mean, that's a lot of money. I mean, I know in Washington this is just a drop in the bucket, and when we put it out to American families, it's just one at a time, and people don't care. But I'm going to tell you, from Northeast Georgia, $15,000 will do a lot. And for my family, and I have a senior and a freshman in high school now. Actually, the high school I went to. It's amazing that it hasn't changed a whole lot in the only 3 or 4 years that I was since I was last there. Unfortunately, it's almost 30 years now. But what has happened is that amount of money, that $15,000, if Doug Collins' family, if Lisa and Doug sat down and said, what can we do with that $15,000? Or what could Jim and Sally do in South Florida, or over in California, or in Arizona, or North Carolina, when you have families sitting down and talking about their budgets and talking about what they want? Here's what they could do. They could buy a new car. 2013 Ford Fiesta, $13,200. 2013 Chevrolet Sonic, $14,185. Or better yet, and I heard it from this well, passionately explained by a member of the loyal group, my friends from across the aisle, and talking about education and the importance of education, and I believe that as well. But what it could do in Georgia is this: it could send their kids to college. 1 year of tuition and fees at the University of Georgia, $10,262. We can talk about these big things all we want. We can talk about $17 trillion debt. We can talk about budgets that don't balance. We can talk about scandals that are coming out like Pez dispensers. We can talk about all of these things, but in the end, it starts back to what I talked about earlier, and that it goes back to it doesn't matter what the big picture are and what it is to people if they don't understand why it matters to them. And I'm standing here tonight as a member of the Republican, proud member of the Republican Conference, as a conservative. And if you don't believe me, just look at my voting record. Because I believe conservative principles matter. Why do they matter? Because I believe they're the very things that we can explain why they matter by looking at things like this and showing where regulations are hurting our businesses and hurting our jobs. And I can explain to you why $17 trillion debt hurts us. And I can explain because it takes us away from buying the cars that interrupt an industry, that building houses and adding additions or sending our children to college. That's why it matters. That's why conservative principles matter. And if we've not done a good job articulating that, then shame on us. Because that's what matters. It is the individual families. It is the individual hopes that we share. So as I come to a close tonight and having a wonderful time explaining why I believe conservatism matters and why conservatism is relevant for today. I believe it's individual freedom. I believe it's fiscal responsibility. I believe it's constitutionally limited government. And I will continue to view my decisions through those glasses. And there'll be times that we're not all going to agree. On our side, across the aisle, we're not going to agree. But that's what this place is for. It's a place for healthy debate. It's a place in which we can share big ideas. But if we as a body lose the reason we are here, if we lose the fact that we're not here representing always the big ideas or the things that are abstract, when we disconnect ourselves from the dinner tables and the coffee shops and the hardware stores, then we have disconnected ourselves from our purpose for being here. And frankly, Madam Speaker, I don't want to do that. I'm going to be in this well talking about what matters and highlighting things that may not be real sexy to the press. They may not want to put it in the paper, but it matters to the American people. And I want to encourage our body here in the House and our friends across the way in the upper chamber and this administration to say, let's come together. I believe conservative principles matter. I believe conservative issues are what will get us back to the thriving economy and the jobs that we need to be focused on. But it's going to take work. It's going to take explaining. And it's not going to be something we can just brush off. It's going to have to be something that we take seriously so that we can go to our individuals that we see in our grocery stores, in our service stations, in our high school football games and basketball games and baseball games, and we can look our friends and neighbors in the eye and say, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get Congress back to the role of understanding. It's about what happens to you, not what happens to us. And when we do that, then America is much better off in what we have. I appreciate my friend from Missouri being here tonight and discussing these important topics with me. The principles we've set forward tonight will help guide not only myself but others in a month ahead. But also notice that I have been joined by a friend from North Carolina and would be happy to yield to my friend from North Carolina if she would like to say something.
I appreciate the gentleman yielding. I came down for another purpose, but I want to compliment you on the job that you've done tonight and say, as a freshman, I think you have picked up very quickly on the issues involved here, and I commend you for taking the time to explain things so well tonight to the American people.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, your work here is something that I can look up to, and I appreciate that so much. And friends from all over, Congressman Bachmann and others who share this. We've got to share this message. It matters. And we never can lose sight. Even in amongst the 435, we represent 700,000 or more that they're looking to us for good conservative common sense values. The challenges our nation faces are great, but the resiliency of the American spirit is even greater. I'm encouraged by the accomplishments of this body and what we have put forward from the majority and the dedication and commitment of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. When we look at this, we can never forget that the responsibility of the bounty that we have can only be matched by our vigilance to the responsibility to the abundance we've been given. And we keep vigilant, then we'll keep our eyes on the right prize. We'll keep our eyes on what matters, and we'll keep our eyes on our families. And for me, it always goes back to 3 reasons: Jordan, Copeland, and Cameron, and a beautiful lady I call